In today's lesson, we're going to explore three fascinating English idioms: take the heat, have a chip on the shoulder, and up in the air. These idioms add depth and color to our language, so let's get started. Let's begin with our first idiom, take the heat. This expression means to accept or handle criticism, blame, or punishment for something, often on behalf of someone else. Imagine you're in a kitchen, and the stove is too hot for someone else to handle. You step in and take the heat to protect them. Here's a sentence using this idiom: Sarah took the heat for her team's mistake and apologized to the client. So, when you take the heat, you're being responsible and facing the consequences, even if it's not your fault. Our second idiom is have a chip on the shoulder. This phrase means to be easily offended or to hold a grudge, often because of a feeling of being treated unfairly. Think of it like carrying a chip or a piece of wood on your shoulder, ready to react if someone brushes against it. Here's a sentence using this idiom: ever since losing the game, Mark has had a chip on his shoulder and gets upset easily. So, when someone has a chip on the shoulder, it means they're harboring resentment or a grudge. Our third idiom is up in the air. This expression means that something is uncertain, undecided, or in a state of limbo. Imagine a plane suspended high above the ground, not yet landing. It's up in the air. Here's a sentence using this idiom: the date for the meeting is still up in the air, as we're waiting for the boss's confirmation. So, when something is up in the air, it's not settled, and there's still uncertainty about it. These idioms, off the hook, miss the boat, and get off someone's chest, add depth and richness to our language. Keep practicing them, and soon you'll use them like a pro. Now, let's listen to a story, and pay close attention to how these idioms are used.
A taste of redemption. In the bustling city of Riverside, there was a legendary barbecue joint called Smoky Joe's. It had been a family-owned establishment for decades, known far and wide for its mouth-watering ribs and secret sauce recipe. At the helm of the restaurant was Joe Jr., a man who had always felt like he had something to prove. He had grown up hearing stories of his father's culinary prowess, and he had big shoes to fill. Joe Jr. had a reputation for being prickly and having a chip on his shoulder because he always felt overshadowed by his father's legacy. One fateful evening, a renowned food critic named Emily Woods walked into Smoky Joe's. Her reviews were known to make or break restaurants, and the city had been buzzing with anticipation. Joe Jr. was determined to impress her and finally earn the recognition he believed he deserved. Emily took her time savoring each dish, making notes, and chatting with the patrons. As she left, Joe Jr. couldn't help but be nervous. He anxiously awaited her review, knowing that his reputation was up in the air. The following week, the review was published. Emily praised the classic ribs but criticized Joe Jr.'s decision to change the signature sauce. It was a crushing blow to Joe Jr., who had taken a risk in an attempt to step out of his father's shadow. The review sent shockwaves through Riverside. Many regular customers were furious that the iconic sauce had been tampered with, and they let Joe Jr. know it. He had taken the heat for his decision, and it was clear that his gamble had not paid off. Feeling disheartened and misunderstood, Joe Jr. realized that he had been carrying the weight of his family legacy like a heavy chip on his shoulder. He decided to get something off his chest and reached out to the regulars. He held a town hall meeting at Smoky Joe's, where he confessed his motivations, his insecurities, and his desire to honor his father's legacy while still creating his own path. The regulars, moved by Joe Jr.'s sincerity, offered their support, and shared their fond memories of the restaurant over the years. They encouraged him to bring back the classic sauce and appreciated his honesty. Joe Jr. made a decision that would redefine his journey. He decided to revert to his father's original sauce recipe while adding his own unique twist. He felt a renewed sense of purpose and knew that his path was no longer up in the air. It was a path that embraced his family's traditions while allowing him to carve his own legacy. With newfound determination, Joe Jr. set out to perfect the sauce, blending his father's classic recipe with his own innovations. He toiled for days, adjusting the ingredients until he achieved a taste that was both familiar and exciting. The tantalizing aroma filled Smoky Joe's once again, and the regulars eagerly awaited the grand unveiling. As the first batch of ribs, glazed with the reimagined sauce, came out of the smoker, Joe Jr. couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation and hope. He served them to the patrons, and the reactions were unanimous. These ribs were the best they had ever tasted. Word quickly spread throughout Riverside about the revival of Smoky Joe's legendary sauce. People traveled from neighboring towns to taste the unique blend that paid homage to the past while embracing the future. Joe Jr.'s act of humility and willingness to get something off his chest had not only won back his loyal customers but had also gained him a new legion of fans. With each passing day, the restaurant's reputation grew, and lines formed outside the door. Joe Jr. was no longer living in the shadow of his father's legacy. He had carved out his own path. The chip on his shoulder had transformed into a source of inspiration and determination. As the success of Smoky Joe's continued to soar, another food critic, this time from a national publication, paid a visit. The entire city held its breath as they waited for the review to be published. When the review was finally released, it was a glowing testament to Joe Jr.'s dedication, passion, and ability to take the heat. The critic praised the revival of the classic sauce and the innovative twist that made Smoky Joe's stand out in the culinary world. The city celebrated, and Joe Jr. had finally earned the recognition he had always yearned for. But more importantly, he had learned that true success came from being genuine, honoring his roots, and embracing his unique journey. With his restaurant thriving and his heart at peace, Joe Jr. knew that his story was far from over. Riverside had witnessed his transformation, and he was determined to continue serving up not only the best barbecue in town but also a taste of redemption. And so, the legacy of Smoky Joe's continued, a story of second chances, the importance of humility, and the power of embracing one's identity. Joe Jr. had not only taken the heat, but had turned it into a recipe for success.